The Baldwin County Public School System, considered one of the finest educational environments in the entire state of Alabama, has a history beginning in the latter part of the 18th century, when, as records indicate, Alabama's first public schoolhouse was built in the North Baldwin County community of Tensaw in 1799. And at that time, nearly 10 years prior to Baldwin being organized as a county, the area remained geographically expanse. Agriculture served as king, and family farms dotted every section of the county. And in this era of extremely limited highway systems, individual communities built their own respective public schoolhouses, with the Board of Education supplying teachers to provide instruction. In the early part of the 20th century, the Baldwin County Public School System boasted over 80 separate school districts, each with their own individual public schoolhouse. And as time progressed, marked with improvements in transportation and engineering, numerous school districts were consolidated into nearby areas, leaving us today with very few of the original and historic public schoolhouses which distinguished Baldwin County, beginning in 1799, as the birthplace of Alabama's first public schoolhouse. This documentary, commissioned by the Honorable County Commissioners of Baldwin County and honorable members of the Baldwin County Board of Education, seeks to illuminate these few remaining and historic original public schoolhouses in an effort to pay tribute to one of the finest public school systems in Alabama. Located on the same campus with the old Bay Minette Elementary School at the county seat in Bay Minette, the old Baldwin County High School has a rich history of educating students in Bay Minette, as well as the entire North Baldwin County community. Constructed around the first quarter of the 20th century as a consequence of a growing student body, this historic facility at the corner of Blackburn Avenue and 5th Street originally was constructed as an educational institution of 8 classrooms and an auditorium, which accommodated its early enrollment of over 100 pupils. With the classroom size doubling in 1929, this facility enjoyed for a period the inclusion of the 7th and 8th grades, which assuaged overcrowding at the nearby intermediate school. Very much an aesthetic accompaniment to the adjacent Old Bay Minette Elementary School, the Old Bay Minette High School imbues a classic and conservative architectural design demonstrative of tasteful simplicity of an earlier era.
Baldwin County High School was my was my alma mater. I first saw it in 1933, I believe, and I graduated from there in 1936. The first thing that I learned at Baldwin County High School was that I was a swamp rat. This is what the kids at Baldwin County High School called everybody who lived in Stockton, from Stockton north. We actually did live on the edge of the swamp up there, but it was perceived that we lived in the swamp. And we were known as swamp rats. They were fighting words for the first few days, but we soon learned to be proud of it. And as soon as we began to call ourselves swamp rats, the Bay Minette kids left us alone. It was no longer any fun to tease somebody who wouldn't be teased. Baldwin County High School was a wonderful building to me when I walked into it. It was one of the old standard plan schools, but it was heated by steam, and I had never been in a classroom with such modern conveniences. The smaller schools in those days were always heated by pot-bellied stoves with a jacket around them, and that was what I was used to. But when I came to Baldwin County High School, I was introduced to steam heat. They all had steam boilers somewhere in the basement. But they were the safe kind of boilers. There are 2 kinds of boilers: fire tube boilers and water tube boilers. And although they are not as efficient, water tube boilers are a whole lot safer. That means that the water is contained in tubes, and the fire comes up through the tubes. If one of those tubes ruptured, there isn't any chance of an explosion. The water simply goes down and puts the fire out, and that's why they were used for school purposes. In the other type, such as you would use in a steam vessel, the steam, the fire came through the tubes and heated the boil. So if there were a disruption, there was an explosion. But with the other type of boiler, they would just simply put the fire out. The only cooling that those old buildings had was an adjustment of the windows. All of the bigger schools and the larger centers did have electricity from the 20s on, but the schools from which I came did not have electricity, although some of them had generators so that you could have lights at night for school affairs, but we never used electricity in the daytime because the generator was never turned on in the daytime. All stadiums in Baldwin County were built by the schools themselves. It was up to you for all that sort of thing. Until very late years, the Baldwin County Board of Education did not provide electricity even. It was the job of the principal to raise the money to pay his utilities. That was the first job of a high school principal. It's to somehow raise money to pay his utilities. No county funds in my time were ever put into any high school stadium anywhere in Baldwin County. That was all local effort. It all, as we said, it all had to come in through the gate. I just don't know of any county funds in my time that ever went into a high school stadium. The Foley High School stadium was really the first permanent one that was ever built. We did it in my time in Foley, and then where other schools were able to do it. It all became possible when pre-stressed concrete was developed. And there was a place in Pensacola where it was manufactured. This was a development that came right at the end of World War II. And it was made known to us at Foley through some Navy engineers who had been using it around the air station there. So we used it first at Foley, and then the other schools picked up the idea, but they were all built with local effort. Housing for teachers in small communities was always a problem. The teacher was expected to board with members of the community, but sometimes there was just no place for them, and the county decided that it would be economical to build homes at certain schools to attract teachers of quality. The principal of a school got $10 a month for being principal, and then he got $5 a month for every extra teacher that he had, and that was in addition to his regular salary as a teacher, because the principal was in the small school was always a teacher himself or herself. So that free housing in the community was a very large attraction for teachers and with small families. I can remember a number of communities that built these. On the Foley High School campus, we had two of these. One was an original structure, and they later built a better one. And the first structure became the attraction for an agriculture teacher. It was felt that an agriculture teacher in Foley, it was just greatly important that they be able to attract such a teacher, and they couldn't do it without giving him a place to live. Now that was the only school and only one of the four high schools that actually provided for the ag teacher, but Foley had two such residences. In later years, they were when principals no longer wanted to live in the quality of building that were there. At Baldwin County High School, it became the means of attracting a janitor of good quality, which we paid such people such a very low salary that if there were an old building on the premises that he could live in, and I can remember at Baldwin County High School the janitor living in. Same thing at Stapleton School. In my time, the teacherage was occupied by the janitor.
The northern part of Baldwin County is extremely rich in its heritage of public school and a value of education for the community children. At one time, every small community in Baldwin County had a community school built by the citizens and serving the students in that community. In fact, the first public school in Alabama was built at Boatyard Lake by John Pierce in 1799. And it served children in that community for more than 30 years. Throughout the 19th century, virtually every community in Baldwin County had a school building and hired the teacher and maintained the building and paid the teacher in order to provide education for their children in those small rural communities. With the onset of the growth of Bay Minette due to the completion of the railroad and the courthouse being moved here in 1901, the city itself began to grow, and by that time the school system was a viable entity, a part of the county commission system. And at that time the citizens in Bay Minette and the school board began to invest in public schools built by the school system. The first school on record in Bay Minette was actually run by Miss Annie Byrne on Railroad Street. And after that, the first public school listed was actually on the Thompson property on Brady Road. And Mr. Albert Thompson currently maintains a residence on that Thompson property, the site of the old Brady School. Even though it was not in town proper, there were more citizens living in that area. Right about the turn of the century, plans were made to build a modern two-story school in downtown Bay Minette, which are the site of the old scout cabin and where the city park is today. The two-story structure was built in 1901, hoping to move in 1902, but actually the students were housed a little while in another location until they could actually move in 1902 to the two-story building that had a beautiful cupola on top. The bell that was in the cupola, citizens tell us, took 25 horses to lift it into place and could be heard for more than 3 miles on a clear day. That building served students in grades 1 through 12, and the first graduating class from that school in 1904 totaled a number of 3 and called themselves the Pioneers of 1904. As the town grew, the school system began plans to build a school that would house the high school students. And plans for Baldwin County High School were put in place using the plans provided by the State Board of Education, and blueprints of those were standardized, and Mr. Leslie Smith, former superintendent, is a wealth of information on the building program that took place in the 1920s and the 1930s throughout the state of Alabama.
By the late 1920s, the state of Alabama school systems, as well as the Baldwin County school system, had outgrown their cramped facilities. As a result, in 1927, the State Board of Education promoted a building project they called the Unified Project, which was to put almost $8 million into strictly building new facilities or renovating old facilities and extending the ability of those facilities to serve students. As a result, late in 1927 and in early 1928, a bond issue of some $20 million was promoted by the State Board of Education. Problems, however, arose with the bond issue on local levels for several reasons. And in 1927, a Baldwin Times article issued by R.B. Vail, who was editor at the time, described numerous reasons why the bond issue wasn't appropriate at the time. Namely, among the issues was the fact that the interest alone would increase the bond indebtedness to around $35 million. Beyond that, R.B. Vail and local concerned citizens were afraid of the political quagmire that would result from a fight over the bond issue. He believed, as well as others, that a fissure would develop in the political community and in local communities among people who were in favor of the bond issue and among those who were opposed to it. And lastly, Vail believed, as well as other citizens, that the bond issue, the $20 million, could quite possibly go to other counties. They felt like there might be a disparity in what Baldwin County would get in the bond issue. As a result, ultimately, the bond issue failed on a statewide level. Nevertheless, school buildings were necessary. New construction was necessary for the ever-growing school-age population in Baldwin County and throughout the state. As a result, many counties, including Baldwin, issued their own warrants. Baldwin issued warrants in the amount of $250,000 to complete their own building project. Those projects were begun in 1928 and lasted for several years thereafter. Baldwin County residents weren't afraid of voting in favor of a 3-meal tax to support the warrants if that money actually went to Baldwin County.
I would like to mention the fact of us that lived in the rural areas eventually getting to Baldwin County High School. I lived in Stockton, Alabama, which we had a nice school, and they had schools years before in different buildings like a Masonic Hall or whatever before they got the public school built. I was in the public school there, and from my house to the school I could walk, or did walk, and I was about 25 miles south of the county line, and children came from that distances in the morning to the Stockton school. The ones that came on to Bay Minette would get off at the schoolhouse and get on the bus that came on to Bay Minette. Some of the children that came from Little River and Blackshaw and up that way would have to be on the road before it got daylight to be able to catch the buses. When we got to school, it was we were the janitor. You more or less got the privilege of sweeping the hall and the room and so on if you didn't do your work or if you didn't do exactly what you were told. So we didn't have the janitors back then, but we had a good school and outstanding teachers. The teachers lived in the community, and they knew the parents, they knew the children, and to me that makes an awful lot of difference. And we graduated from the elementary part in the 6th grade, and we had a graduation and graduated in the auditorium on the stage, and all the families came. In the 9th grade, we also graduated to come to the 10th grade at Baldwin County High School, still by bus. That's the first time the Stockton students were bused. Those above Stockton was bused from the beginning. Sometimes something would happen to the bus. Maybe it wouldn't start on a cold morning or something like that, And the children at the school building would wait till they had about give it up. Then they would walk on down to my house, and we'd wait a while, and if they didn't show up, we went to my house, wound up the Victrola, rode the rug back, and danced. And as I said, so we were very happy if the bus didn't run, and I was in particular. But anyhow, we came down here, and it was a different world. It was the first time that we had changed rooms, and the teachers staying where they were. And we met new friends, and there was a difference in the people that rode the bus and the ones that live here in town, because they had grown up together, gone to school together all their life, and we were the new kids on the block. And it all worked out very well, but it was a change for those of us that came from the rural area that the local children here referred to as swamp rats. Started school in about 1930 when the Depression was there. You didn't have electricity, and our school had a Delco that gave us lights at night when we had used the auditorium. Back then, a lot of people didn't have the money for the tuition, and they did different things. I know my daddy had trucks, and he would haul wood for the stoves that were heated the classroom to help pay tuition. And they didn't landscape like they do now. They had an Arbor Day, and different families would bring some kind of tree and plant it. And so it's a different world. After we graduated from the 9th grade, as I said, we rode a bus from Stockton to Bay Minette, and on that bus was also students from Little River, Blackshaw, Tensall, Latham, all through Highway 59. And our bus driver was Mr. Thomas Phillips, and we called him Uncle Tom. And we had a real good time on the bus, and we got down here, and I believe Mr. Cameron was the first principal. I remember being here when we first came, and then Mr. Mason followed him, and I wasn't smart enough to take chemistry. So I don't know what all went on in that room that Tom was talking about. But anyway, it was a different experience for me, as I said, changing room and going from one room to the other, and coming from one that didn't, in a smaller school, and everybody knowing one another. I was always afraid I'd get in the wrong room at the wrong time. But anyway, we made it, and it was other Stapleton, and I believe Gateswood and Perdita, and all did the same thing, and the lower grades moved on into Bay Minette for their final education before college.
I attended school here I'm a 1943 graduate of Baldwin County High School, and looking at it, I could see that it's gotten a little smaller. It appears that way. I live in Stockton, and I rode a bus 10 miles every day to get here. There was a little difference between the bus students and the town students, but we all got along. This was during the war years, and I guess the war was affected the school very much here. I know it did me personally. But we had a lot of the teachers that were encouraging us to stay in school and finish school, and we had boys that were graduating, that were volunteering and going on into the service. The draft was in effect at that time, and we knew we would be going into the service sometime. But I remember especially two teachers here. They were twins, the Sellers twins, Julia and Eugenia, and they very much encouraged everybody to stay and at least finish high school. There was a provision for that. You got a deferment to finish school. Of course, a lot of the boys, I guess, I don't know, how would you describe those that left, Davida? The more adventurous types or something? I believe there were about 66 in our class, and I don't know exactly how many volunteered ahead of time and went into the service. And then I graduated out of high school into the Army, I call it. There were many funny events. I'll just mention one. There was a teacher here, Miss Lillian Leonard. You'll probably hear a great deal about her, who was a chemistry and physics teacher, and she was quite a person. She was an excellent teacher, but we always had a lot of fun. We could tease Miss Leonard, and the fellows would make hydrogen sulfide and, you know, put it in the locker and have a terrible odor of the rotten eggs. That usual thing happened. And then I remember one time we were in a physics class and there was a table, and then there was a chair here, and we were doing all kinds of experiments. And so we sat at this boy, Harry Steele, who was a very intelligent young fellow. We put this wire on the chair and called Miss Leonard over. We had it rigged where when she touched the wire together, it would shock her. And we said, Miss Leonard, come over here, we want to show you about this experiment. Said, look, when we touch this wire to this, and that shock hit her, and she jumped up, she grabbed the first thing that she could get, which was a book, and sent it sailing across the room at somebody. The graduation exercises were held in the grammar school auditorium. There was room for all of us to go in there. I don't think we all got on the stage, but we sat in there. And I don't remember, you know, we had the usual things. I don't remember who spoke, or I remember very distinctly lining up behind the grammar school and marching in and having the ceremony, and of course, you know, passing it in front of the principal. A man named, I believe his name was P.M. Mason, was the principal here part of the time when I was here. And of course, after graduation, we scattered. We didn't, our class of 43 did not have a reunion for 40 years. Our first reunion was 40 years later, and we had a big time here. We got everybody in. We went through the school, and that's why I said a while ago it looked smaller. Those rooms and halls looked big to me then, and you go in there now and they're rather small. But if I could find some of those things that we had at our 40th reunion, it would be helpful.
Baldwin County High School, built on 5th and Blackburn Avenue in Bay Minette, was the first following the plans from the state. It was a brick building. It was an E-shaped building with the front entrance leading toward the auditorium, which was the standard building at that time for the state plans. The school itself was begun in 1921 and had a graduating class in 1922. The yearbooks, the Balco Alla, were in publication from the very beginning and provide us beautiful photographs and information about the people who were in attendance there, and many prominent citizens in Alabama were graduates of Baldwin County High School. One of the earliest principals, Mr. Simmons, was honored by having the football field named for him in the late 1920s. In the 1920s, the school itself had a powerhouse of athletic programs and opportunities for students. One of the first in the state with girls basketball. Their football team was quite impressive, and a lot of emphasis was placed on extracurricular academic clubs. By the 1930s, the school itself was a state-recognized first-class facility for education and producing some of the outstanding leaders. In 1929, the old grammar school on the old City Park site was becoming outdated and needed to be replaced, and the citizens and the school board began plans to build the elementary school adjacent to the high school on 5th Avenue. The elementary school was completed in 1929, again following some of the state recommended plans, and the students from the elementary school, the old called the grammar school at that time, moved into the elementary school in 1929. The metal sign that graced the entrance to the old high school that said Baldwin County High School is etched in the memory of most citizens in Bay Minette. It was first placed in front of the old Baldwin County High School and was the scene of many student gatherings throughout the years. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, students of the high school met there, used it for backdrops of many photographs. It was later moved to the site of the football stadium and is preserved to this day.
I have fond memories of Baldwin County High School. However, I came here in the 6th grade. Prior to that, I attended Frisco Consolidated School, a Rabun school in grades 1 through 5. Had 2 teachers, Miss Lottie and Miss Lucy Merrill. They were 2 old-maid teachers. But I came here in 6th grade, was a self-contained classroom, along with the students from Rabun. Students from Bell Fountain came in the 6th grade, and we fed into the 6th grade classes then, and then of course went on to junior high in 7 through 12. When we got to 7th grade, we had students from Crossroads, White House Fork, and Stapleton join us at that time. And in 7th grade, I became a member of the band and made lots of friends from those other schools as we assimilated into the school with all the other students. And like I said, I have fond memories here. I was a member of the band. Mr. James Harris was our band director. He was a tough taskmaster. We worked until we got it right. And if we didn't have it right, we worked some more. Had some wonderful teachers here, and thinking back over that, I got to thinking about my favorite teachers, and some of the ones that I remember were Mrs. Ingram, Mr. Owen, who later became principal of Bay Minette Middle School, Coach Trim, and these were social studies teachers. And I loved social studies. At one time I thought I would major in that, and then decided that I liked home economics. Of course, it's consumer sciences now, but back then we called it plain old home economics. And Mrs. Jones was my home ec teacher, and because of her I ended up at Auburn, and didn't end up in home economics, ended up in family and child development, which led to a career in education, because I had majored in family and child development. Also, another favorite teacher was Miss Bolin, who was a science teacher, and of course Miss Hayes, who was the biology teacher, and that was always a lot of fun because you got to get out with your friends and collect leaves and bugs and do those kinds of things. Baldwin County High School was a community school serving lots of communities, but everybody seemed to fit in well and get along well, and things just worked out the way they were supposed to. The campus here is really neat. I have fond memories here because at lunchtime we took our 35 cents, which was what it cost to eat in the cafeteria, but we didn't go to the cafeteria, we would go to the snack bar, and the ladies in the cafeteria had made ham sandwiches or ham and cheese sandwiches, so we would buy a sandwich, a bag of potato chips, and a carton of milk for our 35 cents, and then we'd come out on the front lawn of the campus and have our lunch, which was a lot of fun. Of course, when you got to high school, you got to leave campus, so we would either walk across the street and walk uptown to the snack bar, And if it was a bad day, we might end up with a hot fudge sundae for lunch. Or, if you had a car, you could drive down to the Y, which was at the intersection of 31 and 59, or one of the other little snack bars that were along the way there, which was interesting. Band trips were a lot of fun. Like I said, I was in the band, and of course traveling with the band, and that's where sports and band activities and groups like that are so important, because you connect with a small group of students and you really bond. So traveling to football games was always a lot of fun on the bus. Going to state band contest was always a lot of fun, and we always found things to do. And of course I was pretty strict on my children, because sometimes I did some things that were not real safe. And after the fact you think about it, but nothing ever happened. It was, we always made it back safely. But that was a lot of fun, just being in the band and being with that group, and traveling, not missing a football game in 4 years. We had a great football team and an outstanding band back in the 60s. Back in the, when I was in school, after each home football game, there was a dance, and we would all go down to what used to be the City Hall in Bay Minette for a dance after each home football game.
I was born in Elsinore on a turpentine still. My dad was a woods rider. We moved to Bay Minette when I was 5 years old. That would be kindergarten now. However, at New Life School, where Miss Edna Paul was my teacher, my birthday being October the 7th, the cutoff was October the 5th at that time, so I was able to start when I was still 5, and made me graduate from high school when I was 17. New Life School was just down the hill, so of course there was no busing. We walked through a cornfield of my uncle's to get down to the school and the church, as it was at that time too, and still New Life Baptist Church. It was a one-room schoolhouse, grades 1 through, I'm not sure how far, whether it was total junior high or not, because when I was in 5th grade, the bus was turning around all this time in our yard out in front of my mom and dad's house, and between my dad and 2 of my uncles, they decided that we should come to big school. So of course that dissolved New Life School, because that was the biggest portion of the kids. I must pay tribute to Miss Edna, because about, not half, but a great portion of us became school teachers, and several others went on to successful careers. In that type of school, those who could helped those who couldn't. Having become a special education teacher, I fully appreciate that. So different now than it was then. Coming to big school meant riding the bus. It also meant coming from a tiny rural school into a large, even though in 5th grade, Miss Beebe was my teacher, I believe. And it was quite an experience. Of course, we were all scared to death, because here were all these millions of people to us when you come from 20 or fewer. One of my experiences that I will never forget would be that we did not have playground equipment. And of course the monkey bars hurt your hands, so I was going to be very, very smart. Got me 2 potato chip bags and put them under my hands, and guess what? Slap on the ground, knocked the breath out of me. I did not do that again. Then when 7th grade came, I cannot remember my 6th grade teacher's name, but 7th grade was a brand new experience. You came over to this great, big, huge museum. This was the junior high wing. This was the senior high wing. it was like you were almost afraid to go to the bathroom because, you know, this was such an experience. But again, new friends were made and formed, and lifetime friendships came of that. One of my favorite experiences was club day. You did not meet after school for a lot of clubs. 4-H club, I remember, library club. You had a period for clubs, whether it was a study hall period or whether it was, I can't remember. Looking at my senior report card, my husband said last night, I don't think you took enough subjects since only 4 were listed. But all of my other years are listed, and in some of them you had 5, and I only had 1 PE, but I thought I took PE every year. Maybe not. Home ec was another very favorite subject in this building, just on the other side of this one. And I learned that we learned to sew and to cook, and of course my mother sewed and cooked and made all of our clothing. There were 4 girls in our family and no boys. But it was quite an experience when you had to time food to get it all to come out and put it on a table, and that was a challenge. It really, really was. And but there were some really wonderful experiences. Some of my favorite teachers, of course, was Miss Stow, the librarian, Sabre Atkins' mother. The typing, I know Gaynell Grant now. She was a Downey before she married and was Miss Downey. And I loved her. I made straight A's in typing till it came to a speed test, and I cannot be timed. So I made a C every time. I was not interested in the sciences, so I did not, take biology until I got to college. Mrs. Leonard, I know, was a very fine teacher. Mr. Eccles was also here, very strict. Mr. McDuffie was my senior English teacher, and I won't forget Macbeth because we did lots with Macbeth. I loved civics. Mainly, I planned to be a secretary, so I took a lot of business courses and ended up working at Donaghy Plumbing in Mobile after graduation for 4 years before going to college. But the football games, the pep rallies, those were wonderful, and we got out early to go out to the stadium and that kind of thing. Our graduation was held on the football field, as even when my nephew graduated back in the 70s, it was still going on, or maybe the 80s, on the football field. And a great nephew, it poured rain. Hopefully they don't have it on the football. Do they still have it on the football stadium? Ah, goodness. But this building, very historic. It's going to be sad to see it come down. It really, really is. I know progress comes and progress goes, but this building holds a lot of memories for a lot of people. And even though it was very challenging to begin with, it became definitely a part of me of which I'm proud.